I'd like to share an update on a number of the projects on this latest van build. And so to begin with, the walls aren't finished yet. We have some more paneling to do up top. But one of my first priorities is to make sure that things are functional as far as where wires are run and does everything fit and so on. So one of the uniquenesses of CampMaker project is I like to build vans that are good for all seasons, full weather van, so insulation is a big deal. Windows are one of your biggest areas of heat loss, and so what I do is I install a window that has the 1.5 inch thick trim ring, and so then I build a box around the frame that holds it, and then that provides a great spot for this insulated insert. So I'm using 1/2 inch polyiso foam. I cover it with a piece of contact paper, so silver contact paper on both sides. It comes silver on one side, so I add the silver on the second side. And then it's made so it just fits snugly. And then once it's in place, it provides the same R value as the regular insulation, 1 inch of polyiso foam. When you have it set up that way, basically it creates a perfect way to reduce the heat loss in your van. And then I've done water systems in different ways. It's common for folks to do the jerry jug scenario where you have 5 gallons of gray water and 5 gallons of fresh water underneath your sink. And what I found was that we pretty regularly ran out of fresh water quickly with the 5 gallons. It just wasn't enough. And then sometimes it's pretty hard to find a good source for that replacement water. And so I felt like the idea of having a simple water system is still important. And the jerry jug system allowed it to have a faucet that would just turn on a submersible pump from the jerry jug. And so I thought, well, what if I went a step bigger, had a 20-gallon tank, for instance, in back, but used that same setup where it was a submersible pump. It just goes from the source up to the faucet, and then when you turn on the faucet, there's a micro switch inside that then runs the water. And so by doing that, it creates a very simple system. A lot of plumbing systems might have 20 plus PEX connections on them. And essentially, this scenario has one connection at the pump, and then it's one continuous hose up to the faucet, and so a second connection on the faucet. It's visible if it ever was to leak. There's no question where it is, and so it's kind of foolproof in that way. This project, I switched from an east-west bed, so I'm trying out the 2 twin beds, and I order memory foam mattresses, and then I cut them up to the right size. These are, the covers come from Rec Pro. It's upholstery covers, and I intentionally did them so that they're fairly loose, so that they really make a soft, nice bed to sleep on, but then they also work well as a kind of couch area. So what I've done in the back here is I have a 20-gallon tank, and on top of that 20-gallon tank, and this idea came from George from Humble Road Van Builds. He suggested the idea of having it so that you can get to your water tank and clean it out periodically. And I know from commercial so water systems, municipalities, that type of thing, they have to periodically have special scuba gear resources that go down and actually clean out their tanks after a certain amount of time. And so, you know, the idea that eventually your tanks do develop a scum inside is a reality. And then there's ways to clean it out with chlorine and all that. But in general, the idea of being able to get down there and actually scrub it out periodically is a good thing. I also took a lead from George where there basically isn't a need to have any plumbing at the bottom of the tank. So in other words, a hole, a drain, anything at the bottom of the tank that again eliminates the risk of water damage or leaks, which is a priority for any RV owner, and yet it's a very, very common problem across multiple RVs. And so instead what I did is I attached a boat hatch in. And so it has a boat hatch like this that you can open up. You can reach down in there when you need to clean it out, scrub it out, and then you put the boat hatch on. And then I have a second. So there's a 4-inch hole and a submersible pump like this that just goes straight down in a tube that goes to almost, within about a half an inch of the bottom of the tank. And a single line, this hose as well as the power line. And so then that's what allows the whole system to work in terms of no drippage, but also the simplicity of running the water, especially when it's underneath, very quiet, and so on. Let's see, what else should I talk about? So one of my goals was that these benches wouldn't be too high. It's quite easy to make them too high to be comfortable to sit on, and these are right on the edge of something that once you have some pillows or whatever, they can work. But the height of the propane tank, for instance, and so I've got a Propex heater underneath here, and then here's the Propex tank. It's a propane vault, so you can have a tank inside that is vented to the outside. And so it's got a vent that goes right near the top of the tank going out. It has a secondary vent that goes straight down. And so if there happens to be any leak inside this area, then that'll be vented to the outside. This is a squatty tank, so it's not a real tall tank, but I think it's a 10-pound tank, so 2.5 gallons, approximately half size of what the normal 5-gallon tank would be. It includes a shutoff valve and a pressure valve, water column valve, monitor, so you can keep track of those things. On the left side of the van here is primarily the electrical system as well as extra storage. And it's common in a bed bench scenario to have an electrical system that is very hard to get to as far as all the components. And so I worked pretty hard to make sure that you could access everything. So in back here is a 280 amp hour SOK battery. It's heated, Bluetooth, really nice battery that works really well for especially the all-season scenario. For many years I built systems with 200 amp hours and felt like it was okay, but felt like 280 would be a little bit nicer just to give you a little more buffer. The electrical system has a solar panel on the roof that's a 500 watt. So it's a single 500 watt panel, and so that combined with the 280, and then it has a somewhat small inverter, 1200 watt inverter. But a lot of times you're basically only running one heating item at a time, and so then that 1200 watts works pretty well. I'm using KISAE, K-I-S-A-E. It's a combined 50 amp charger, so it charges, so it can charge up to 50 amps from solar. In this case, it would be about 40 amps max with that panel. And then it also charges at 50 amps when you're driving down the road, so the DC to DC charger. And so I think it's a nice balance there where it provides good charging even if the sun isn't shining very much. You've got a cloudy day. You've got lots of charging from your DC to DC charger as you're driving. And then on the front of this, I created sliding panels so you can open it up and be able to turn off individual items, change fuses, check any wire connections. So this opening on the front, that's just a sliding door access, makes a good access for things. And then on top of that, I have a fan here. So if it's a hot day and things inside the cabinet start getting warm, then this fan will basically go out and through a vent in the back. Thank you. One of the unique amenities that I've added to this van is an electric fireplace. I've found that oftentimes, even though we don't stay in RV parks, we do have access to shore power, and so then it is helpful to use electric heat to heat the van. You can set this thermostat at like 68 degrees and be nice and toasty and be able to establish that even heat. But then clearly when we're off grid, then you can't use electric heat to heat your van. And so I wanted one that had the flame only option that used a very small amount of energy. And oftentimes they're about 350 watts just to run the flame, which is, I'm not quite sure how that is necessary. But in this case, so I tried a number of different units, and this one only needs 38 watts to run the flame. So when we're off grid, we can use our propane heat to heat the van, but then still have the ambiance of the flame. And in this location, I'll have a small table that will be mounted right here. It can be removed when need be. This other box right here is the toilet, but it also works well as a seat. And so this dinette space can be functional for lots of things in the van, but it's a nice amenity to have the extra ambiance. So if it's a cold night in the van and, a cold night outside, but you have to stay, quite a few hours inside, then to have the ambiance of the electric fireplace is a nice plus.